Welcome back to another edition of Paulie TV. I'm Paulie Malignaggi, your host. And today I'm going to go into a subject matter that I think a lot of boxing fans, a lot of you boxing fans have tend to discuss among you guys. It's something that, for me, there's no definitive answers. A lot of boxing conversations and topics and debates tend to have this kind of thing. That's why they make for such good debates. But what is the premier belt in boxing? Should we say sanctioning body? Then again, the ring belt doesn't count as a sanctioning body, but we counted this in our options to vote. And we did take a poll, and based off of our poll, the overwhelming response for the best belt sanctioning body title, world title in boxing, is the WBC, with second place finish with 70% of your votes. Really, a lot of you guys really came in strong with the WBC vote. Ring Magazine belt came in second at 17%, the IBF title at 6%, and the WBA and WBO title had 3% each. Now, for me, it doesn't really make a difference. I think the Ring Magazine title is a little bit different in that it's given by a magazine. It has certain different stipulations. It's not really a mandatory challenger that does or ever gets enforced. I think it's still a cool belt. It has a lot of prestige because it goes way back, and plus Ring Magazine has a lot of prestige with boxing fans. Interestingly enough, the WBA is probably older than the WBC, but the WBC had the overwhelming amount of votes from you guys. And I can see why. The WBC they do a great job of marketing themselves. I've got a really good relationship with all the sanctioning bodies. I've been to the conventions of several of the sanctioning bodies, including the WBC. And from what I noticed in my observation is they have probably the best, not only the best marketing team, but they also go into other things like humanitarian efforts. They do charities and whatnot. They do things that the other sanctioning bodies don't do, and they also they have a strong PR team in general, and they market themselves very well. I don't know that the other sanctioning bodies have as strong a team in these departments, if they have one at all, really. You know what I'm saying? And I think the fact that a lot of you guys are voting for the WBC, for me, shows you the power of marketing, the power of just creating the brand, because WBC really has created a brand, while the other belts are sort of just sanctioning body world championships. I'll let you guys in on a secret. In boxing, by boxing contracts, when you first turn pro and you sign a contract, you get a stipulation for which belts will raise your minimums and which belts will make your money. Any of the top 4 sanctioning bodies will raise your minimums. It doesn't matter which one you win. So by financial and monetary standards, the title belts of any of the 4 major sanctioning bodies, they don't really matter which one you win if you're the fighter. You may have a preference for certain sentimental feelings or whatnot. Maybe the fans, obviously you guys have a lot of sentimentality towards WBC, but professional boxers and their contracts, we sign a contract, and especially when we turn pro and we're fighting for the bare minimums, and then we're trying to raise our bare minimums. Our minimums raise when we win a major world championship of any of the 4 major sanctioning bodies. It doesn't matter which one. One doesn't have any precedence or importance over the other. While the WBC has a great marketing team, ultimately it really doesn't matter for the fighters which one of these belts they end up winning, as long as they win the belt. And ultimately, once you have a world championship, the most important thing, you carry yourself as a champion. The marketability each champion has, I think that goes a long way. Obviously, the WBC being based in Mexico, a lot of the most popular fighters in history are Mexican fighters, especially in modern history, because I think the Mexican culture is probably the biggest of boxing cultures, with other sports not really intruding so much. Probably soccer, a little bit of Mexican culture, but other than that, I mean, boxing really stands head and shoulders above the rest. I don't know actually in Mexico if soccer or football is more higher, on a higher pedestal than boxing, or they're pretty close. Listen, England has a lot of great boxing fans as well, but soccer or football, as they call it there too, is on a much higher pedestal, even in England, where they have great boxing fans. So I think WBC being based in Mexico, crowning a lot of Mexican world champions who are very, very popular in a culture that obviously pushes boxing a lot, has a lot to do with this popularity, because a lot of the WBC champions are fan favorites, big ticket sellers, and so it gives the appearance that the BC is more important than the other titles. But again, from a personal standpoint and from an experience standpoint and just being in the business in general, none of the four really make a major difference. And even honestly, I'd say in the Hall of Fame voting or Fighter of the Year voting, ultimately it's your personal results. Getting those belts, any of the 4 belts, first you got to get there. But then once you have any of those 4 belts, it's your results with the 4 belts. It's the way you conduct yourself with the 4 belts, the kind of fighter you are with any of the 4 belts that you've won. Now that's really pushing you head and shoulders above the rest. So I don't think winning a WBC title over winning an IBF title or a WBO title makes a big difference once you have a world championship. At that point, once you've won any of those 4 world championships, it's on the fighter personally and his marketing team and his promotional team to see how far they can push him or how far the fighter can go himself based on his results. But again, it goes to show you this poll we just did here at Paulie TV, with you guys overwhelmingly voting for WBC, which is obviously a very good sanctioning body. I think it really goes to show you the importance of marketing, the importance of PR, public relations, and whatnot. With WBC having so much more of an advanced team in these departments, they've got all your attention. You know, you guys clearly feel WBC is the premier sanctioning body, when in reality, the major 4 are one is just as good as the other, as long as a fighter wins that belt, you know. So for me, I've heard the grumblings in boxing, and I always hear WBC spoken more about it by boxing fan bases and whatnot. Even certain fighters, you know, they always think, oh, the green belt. But really, bro, at the end of the day, you know, Julio Cesar Chavez was a WBC world champion. I mean, the father was an unbelievable world champion. But then, based off of the trickle-down effect, they somehow made the son a world champion too. That guy's a WBC world champion. So, you know, it's hard to, you know, Junior was kind of pushed into that in every way they could get him, right? I mean, he probably lost 4 or 5 fights on his way up, so had he not been Chavez's son, he probably wouldn't have got any of those decisions. He did end up getting 1 or 2 good wins, actually. Yeah, I know he's a win over Andy Lee, but ultimately, you know, that guy become a world champion by a sanctioning body that you guys feel is head and shoulders above the other sanctioning bodies. I don't know about that. You know what I'm saying? So, and don't get me wrong, some of the other sanctioning bodies have had questionable champions too. You know, sometimes you have questionable champions and sometimes you don't have questionable champions. I know some of you guys are going to say, well, Paulie, you won what sanctioning bodies and you weren't that good. Well, I won 2 of them, so I was actually pretty good. I didn't do it once. I did it twice. So it's a little bit of a tough debate there too, because I don't like to put myself into these. But nonetheless, you know, with respect to all the sanctioning bodies, even respect to the Ring Magazine title, I am not always crazy in defending the Ring Magazine title, because I've seen situations where guys just sit on the sidelines or refuse to fight their number 1 contender in the ring ratings, and just there's no penalty, there's no punishment, there's no nothing. Sometimes guys are out of action for a long period of time and they're not stripped, or nothing can be forced really. You know, it's sort of an imaginary title, but it's a cool imaginary title because the Ring Magazine has such a premier history in boxing. But I don't really necessarily rate it like the sanctioning bodies. So the sanctioning bodies have some sort of set of rules where they can enforce mandatories, although, you know, they're getting more and more away from that and creating more and more detours and creating more and more secondary belts. But I've already done a video on that. Nonetheless, there is some kind of rules and stipulations there, and fights sometimes do get enforced based on the sanctioning body rules. Ring Magazine has no ability whatsoever to enforce their title fights. You just got to go by who you crown the champion and by Ring Magazine, and then whatever he wants to do, he does. You know, I can't get down with that completely. Although I think having the Ring Magazine title is a cool thing. I think it would, you know, I think any fighter that wins it, it's a cool thing because it's a historical publication and it's a historical belt that's been made by that publication for a long time. You know, I'm gonna go into some of your comments on this thread with the poll. Big L is really big on the Ring Magazine title. You know what? You and Brian Kenny should get along. You know what I mean? I'm friends with Brian Kenny. He's a passionate boxing fan. But sometimes we disagree with, and when we both worked at Showtime for years back, we tended to disagree sometimes, you know? But I think you and Brian Kenny would get along perfectly because he's a big Ring Magazine belt guy. I am not. I do think it's a cool title to win. I do think it's fun. It's prestigious in its own way. It has sort of a collector's memorabilia kind of feel because so many historical champions from going back in the day, even pre-sanctioning body, the Ring Magazine title existed, right? So I think it's cool, but it cannot and does not enforce defenses against certain fighters. Sanctioning bodies, they sometimes don't either, but at least they'll sometimes attempt to. Ring Magazine does not, will not, and doesn't get involved. You can fight the number 100 ranked fighter as a Ring Magazine champion, and the Ring Magazine, the ring will not strip you, will not do anything. I can't see something completely unenforceable as the main title. It is impossible, because guys' primes in boxing sometimes only last a couple of years. There are guys who are, some guys have a longer prime, some guys have a shorter prime, but the fact that if you can get into your prime and be fortunate enough to be a world-class fighter is already hard enough. Then what about if you got a champion who manages to win the Ring Magazine title and doesn't defend it against your top guy, or even your top 5 guys, or maybe even your top 10 guys, who knows, in the Ring Magazine, in the Ring ratings, because the Ring has their own ratings, right? The belt is completely unenforceable. It never is enforceable at all. Sometimes guys sit out for long periods of time, and they're not even stripped. Actually, I've seen situations where guys, I think, had to retire in order to be stripped. I think Tyson Fury maybe was stripped of the Ring Magazine title after a while when he took a long time off, but it's just not enforceable enough for me. I can't see it as the premier title. They all have problems. Don't get me wrong. And Big L talks about the problems in the sanctioning bodies. I can't disagree. They all have problems, but don't come at me like the Ring Magazine doesn't have its own. Ring Magazine title doesn't have its own problems. To me, the Ring Magazine title has big problems, and in terms of the fact that it's never enforced, and they don't even get involved in that. So I can't consider it the best for that reason. But I'm not also totally brushing it aside either. I think it has some cool qualities. Kid Presentable, he likes the IBF title. Though Kid Presentable, you said that you can't enforce the WBC title anymore, which means their PR system had got you at first. You were a WBC guy. And I think, the fact that a lot of people are WBC first guys is because, again, as I've said, it's based off the PR team, based off the fact that the WBC is conscious of itself as a brand and not just as a belt, and it pushes this. And it's very intelligent to do this, obviously. The IBF enforces mandatories. You know what? I haven't seen too many IBF interim titles. I haven't seen too many WBO interim titles. I think you're starting to kind of see them now. But what I liked about the IBF and WBO, they were the newer kids on the block, but they weren't creating interim titles yet. What ends up happening, though, is once the WBA and WBC started creating these secondary titles, you're starting to see the IBF and WBO start to sneak them in a little bit, because they're saying, hey, man, these guys are making extra money, creating extra belts. We're missing out by not doing this. But I still don't see them doing this as much as the other two. So I do prefer that. I'll say that much. I don't really like interim champions. Or if you're gonna make an interim champion, the title fight with the main champion has to happen within 6 months. Which at one time when I was a kid was actually the rule. If there was an interim champion, the main champion had to fight him within 6 months, or the main champion would be stripped and the interim champion would become the full champion without even needing to fight, because the full champion refused to fight him. That was only in very rare situations, though, not every second like now you see with certain sanctioning bodies doing. The IBF and WBO still aren't doing that so much, if they're doing that at all. So I like that. I like that point that he's making. But again, I'm gonna go back to what I always keep saying: the top 4 are the top 4. It doesn't matter which sanctioning body belt you win, as long as you win a world championship of the top 4, the major world title, because now the WBA created the super title, which is actually the world championship. If we really think about it, they just call it a super title because they changed the WBA super champion rules, and they just turned it into a regular world championship. So the world champion of the WBA is now really a secondary title. But nonetheless, I'd say that the premier world champions, the top belt of each of the 4 sanctioning bodies, if a fighter wins any of those, that's it. That he's the guy, and that's it. At that point, then it becomes based on his promotability, what kind of team he has behind him, and what he does and how he performs as a world champion. And that's it, Guys, thanks for watching this video. As always, I appreciate you guys, and I appreciate all the subscriptions I'm getting from you guys, and all the appreciative comments and whatnot. I thank you guys for following along with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Of course, keep subscribing, keep telling your friends. I think we have we're creating a good boxing base here on Paulie TV, and don't forget to tune in for next time.